you can understand why I gravitated to the Democratic Party. Because that was supposed to be the party of peace, the party of compassion. Many Democrats, we still believe in those ideals, but unfortunately, as an institution, it has lost its way.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s running mate, Nicole Shanahan, on her displeasure with the Democratic Party. DNC officials are raising concerns that RFK Jr.'s 2024 bid could benefit Donald Trump in November. Let's bring in former Ohio Congressman, former mayor of Cleveland, Dennis Kucinich, who joins us. He once served as RFK's campaign manager. That was until October. Now running as an independent for Congress, where he served for so long. Mr. Kucinich, thank you for your time. A lot of your fellow former colleagues, former Democratic colleagues, a lot of the independents from whom you're seeking votes in Ohio have concerns that RFK Jr.'s candidacy is going to mean 4 years of Donald Trump. How do you respond to their concerns?
Well, first of all, Scott, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you about the campaign. As you stated, I'm no longer with the Kennedy campaign. I have my own campaign for Congress. Anybody interested could go to Kucinich.com. But with respect to the Kennedy candidacy, I think his candidacy puts pressure on both parties to address the economic issues that are vexing American families right now. You've had real wages go down, the cost of housing and rent, the cost of childcare go up. I think Americans are concerned about the price of food. These economic issues are driving people to make decisions, and will drive them to make decisions about who they're going to vote for president. And I think that in some ways it's an issue that transcends parties. The parties are under pressure to deliver on the economic issues. And if they don't do that, then people are going to look at Mr. Kennedy's candidacy ever more closely.
Sounds like you're arguing this may be an attempt to leverage the Democratic Party to change its positions or change its messaging more so than a true version of a campaign that can win.
Well, I think Mr. Kennedy, and I'm not speaking for him at this point, but I think he would say that the fact that there's 43% of Americans who identify themselves as independents, according to Gallup a couple months ago, 27% Republicans, 27% Democrats, that there is an opening in American politics. I feel the same way at a congressional level, that there's an opening in American politics for a new direction. Whether or not he'll be able to move into that is remains to be seen. Certainly Nicole Shanahan's choice gives him an opportunity to call to the campaign even more attention on the range of issues that she's concerned about. But look, I'll just go back to the point. If we're looking at our politics as only Democrat and Republican, people are feeling there's constraint in the choices. With the economic issues being unresolved for millions of American families, I think we're looking at that's the opening. Whether or not Mr. Kennedy's campaign will be able to exploit that remains to be seen. And it's not about him having leverage. It's about there needs to be a debate in this country about the direction the country's going. My approach is country above party. And I think more and more Americans are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, if the current system isn't producing the things that we need, maybe it's time to start looking at alternatives. And from my point of view, look, I'm not saying anything to condemn Democrats or Republicans. I was elected to Congress with the help of Republicans. My campaign's inclusive. It's about addition and multiplication, not about division and subtraction. So that's the approach that I take, and I would urge all candidates, whatever lane they're running in, to take that approach.
I want to ask you about Congress and your campaign in a moment. One final question to button up this issue of the presidential race. Since you became familiar with the Kennedy campaign, you know about independent runs, in what states, in what areas do you think a Kennedy candidacy or another third-party candidate could potentially impact the outcome?
Obviously, before I left the campaign, I looked at the electoral map. And it would be up to the Kennedy campaign to disclose the analysis that I did. But I saw then, and it's possible now, if he can get on the ballot, that his campaign could take off in the closing months of the election. But that at this point, because I'm not managing the campaign, I can't offer you any special insight. But the numbers are there, and I just quoted Gallup, and there's a restlessness going on. The people in both parties are concerned about the nominees, and it really has to go beyond the individuals running for president, and who's going to address the economic issues that Americans are concerned about. Just the other day, you had the director of the Congressional Budget Office saying that if we keep going in the direction that we are with debt, that we're looking at market shock. The bond market's are worried. Interest rates are a factor here. I mean, there's economic issues that are affecting the American people. And whichever candidate or candidates of the candidates are able to signal directly to the people that they have a path forward that will help alleviate the kind of tension that exists in households across the country where Americans are drowning in debt, whether it's auto and credit. I think for most families are looking at about $6,500 a year in interest costs, with mortgages about $6,700 a year in interest costs. These economic issues are compelling for people. Let's see if the candidates for president are going to address them. I can tell you this is one candidate for Congress who will.
Real quickly, Mr. Kucinich, what would you do differently in Congress with an I next to your name instead of a D?
Well, first of all, when I'm on the ballot in Ohio, it's just going to be Dennis Kucinich. It's a name that people know well. I served almost half of the district for 16 years in Congress and was elected with support from across the spectrum. As an independent, I could very well end up in a closely divided Congress as the only independent, being a swing vote. And I would communicate to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle a path towards unity in this country. The people of America are hungry for an approach towards unity. They want to tap into that underlying unity that makes us the United States. And this partisan fracturing, this polarization that's going on, people are having difficulty seeing how that's serving the country. So I think that I can help be a calm hand on the fevered brow of this country, that I can help bring Democrats and Republicans together in the interests of Americans. And if it's a 217 partisan split in the Congress and one independent, I have the experience, the knowledge, the wisdom to be able to help guide this country with that single vote.
Dennis Kucinich in Cleveland, thank you very much.
Thank you.